We are the lowest funded party in Parliament, but we always punch above our weight, and we have always delivered. Ladies and gentlemen, as you arrived here today, right on cue, there were hundreds of protesters outside to try and intimidate and influence you. These people protesting could, of course, have done the hard yards themselves and organised their own meeting. Organised their own meeting to put their point of view on a range of issues. But no, their objectives don't include freedom of speech or democracy. They seek to impose their absolute minority view on the mass majority of New Zealanders. And can we say on the issue of Gaza, and that last person that shouted out, not one of them protesting outside have ever spoken to the Palestinian Authority or the neighbouring Egyptian government, or, listen and learn, or the biggest Islamic country in the world, Indonesia, or dare we say, the President of Turkey. All of these international authorities and many more, we have personally spoken to, so they understand with great clarity what New Zealand's position is. These so-called protesters outside wouldn't know what geopolitics or democracy looks like, yet they have the arrogance to try and lecture you and disrupt you, like they have a clue what they are talking about. Shame on them. If their message was clear, why would they mindlessly have to go on repeating it for hours? What a cauldron of slow learners. So those no-hopers have come here today with one certain intention: to grab the mainstream media headlines and try to destroy a process that we, as one of only 8 other countries, have practiced unbroken since 1854. It's called democracy. They don't care about democracy. They don't care that in our democracy we are lawfully allowed to meet here today undisturbed. They are just left-wing fascists who preach freedom of speech, but try their best to deny it to those who they disagree with. That's what they are doing here today. More to the point, what is unfortunately likely going to happen at some stage in this speech today is a few of them will try to disrupt this lawful meeting, which you have all come to, with their unlawful ways just to try and get on the 6 o'clock news. That's how communist, fascist and anti-democratic losers work. That's their idea of a hard day's work. Well, we have news for them, and it's all bad. As Elvis sang, looking for trouble? You've come to the right place. We are going to defend our democracy, and we will throw all of those fascists out. If they don't understand that the tikanga in this place is like on marae. You hear people out. You don't shout and disrupt. In this hall today, there are men and women of all ages, of all races, religions and creeds. This is a meeting of New Zealanders, people who are living here legally, whether their background goes back 1,000 years or who arrived yesterday, all with the same fundamental protections under the law. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have assembled here today, packing this hall. Let's see if those anti-democratic Marxist whingers prove us right. With their arrogance and disdain for democracy and equal disdain for your rights. Just remember, when they attack, they're not attacking me, they're attacking you and ordinary New Zealanders who want their say. On the economy, As President Clinton once said, it's the economy, stupid. So let's reflect on our economy and what we inherited as we came into government after October 2023. In September of that year, 1 month before the election, Chris Hipkins was the Prime Minister and Grant Robertson was the Minister of Finance. The following is what they reported on the New Zealand economy to you, the New Zealand people, in September of 2023, just before the last election. In the pre-election economic and fiscal update, what Treasury and all the journalists love to call the preview, because it's confusing, isn't it? But it's the pre-election economic and fiscal update. And they said this, that the economy shows no recession, a growing economy, more jobs, and wages ahead of inflation. They said, and we quote, the preview released today shows New Zealand's economy is turning the corner, end of quotes. Now, it's about New Zealand. I know why you're confused, but that's what they said in September 2023. They said the economy was to grow by 2.6% on average over the forecast period. They claimed further that fiscal rules had been met, that there was a return to surplus. And then this most extraordinary of all boasts, quotes, our economic plan to support New Zealanders dealing with the cost of living while investing in a stronger, more resilient and inclusive economy is working. End of quotes. Ladies and gentlemen, that claim from Hipkins and Robinson made about the economy back then was an outright litany of lies. Within 6 months of that litany of lies, our country was suffering from the deepest and longest economic downturn and recessionary retraction for over 3 decades, for over 30 years. There were fewer jobs. None of the previous government's claims of abiding by its fiscal rules were true. And as we all know, we were experiencing a worsening cost of living crisis. But one of the biggest questions you need to ask is, where was the mainstream media reporting on this? One more time. Where was the mainstream media reporting on this fiction in September of 2023? Ladies and gentlemen, guiding a country is like piloting a massive ocean liner. It takes a long time to turn both around. That means that 6 months after the last election, nearly every economic outcome was the responsibility of the previous government. That is a fact. Because the new current government had no time for its policies to even bed in or to change either the numbers or the outcomes. You can't turn things around that fast. In short, almost all of the slump and the pain is directly the result of the work of Hipkins and Robinson, and they and the mainstream media cannot deny that. So how can you believe a word from the Labour leader when everything that he said when he was in charge as Prime Minister has proven to be drastically wrong and at total variance with the financial facts? It's a running comical commentary of how lacking Labour is of leadership, then and now. You know, you can't make it just eating a sausage roll and getting on a 6 o'clock news. You've got to actually do something. That the only person whose actions were so unforgivable and the economic and social damage so widespread now expects you all to believe that if given a chance, you could trust him to do something different. It is staggering that this is the same person who, when he became Prime Minister, had, and you'll recall what he did, he had a bonfire of the inanities. He wanted to burn nearly everything that he and Robertson had done previous to that. In short, he incinerated many of the policies that he was a critical part in forming. Go back and check the record. And then he went and admitted, and we quote, he said this is stunning stuff, in a moment of great honesty. Here's the quote. Some of the commitments that we made, and I've mentioned some of them, things like Kiwi Build, Auckland Light Rail and so on, we hadn't worked through the exact details of how that would be. And therefore, we weren't able to deliver on the commitments that we've made. End of quotes. I know you're saying, what? But it's true. Those are his words. We're not making this up. These are his words. They're not ours. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the personification of the old saying, you can't build a reputation on what you're going to do, but what you've already done. You can't build a reputation on what you're going to do, but what you've already done. And worse still, just a few weeks ago, he barefaced told the media that in 2023 he ruled us out, when he knows, and the media knows, including the lightweight who was interviewing him, that a year before...
What have you done about the genocide in Gaza?
See, there we go. There we go. Before we... Yes, here we go. I knew he couldn't wait. I knew he couldn't wait. We knew they couldn't wait. These are the kind of fascists they are. They're the kind of fascists you are. Go home. Go home. Here we go. There we go. As I said, true to form, they couldn't even keep their counsel. No, you don't. We're going to get rid of them. I'm asking the security, get rid of them now. See you, sunshine. Where you go? See you. Give that man a Valium. And the next one. No. You're not disturbing us here. We're not going to be put off by you. You take your fascist views offshore. You take your fascism somewhere else. You're not running this place. Come on, security. Get rid of them. Take them out. Get rid of him. Take him out. Right here, right now. Out. Out. Yes. Yes. Get out. Go now. Yes. Get out of the place. Yeah. Shut up and go home. Shut up and go home. That's if they'll have you. You know, ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to be a mind reader to work these people out. Anyway, I was talking about how Hipkins claimed to have ruled us out when he became the Prime Minister of this country, knowing full well, and so did the interviewer, that 12 months before that we'd already done that because of their disastrous running of the economy and their barefaced lies they had told us all. However, we would like to, as we said earlier, we'd like to reflect on the fact that running an economy is like running a big ocean liner. Turning it around to a safer course takes time. But turn it around we have, and the last fiscal update out this week proves it. Incidentally, we are the only political party to give our State of the Nation speech with the benefit of the latest financial information that came out this week. That's the reason why this meeting is being held today, not last week, last month, but today here in Christchurch. We wanted to know with greater accuracy the latest circumstance. And my colleagues in New Zealand First, thank heavens we did. Because the information is a test to our stamina and our foresight and presence of mind. The figures out this week show our economy is now growing at 0.7% for the last quarter, which is just under 3% for the year coming forward, which shows that this coalition government is taking our country out of recession. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that it's tough out there. Some of us do understand what poverty tastes, smells, and feels like. Some of us understand from way back when we were young. I know you don't. I know you don't. There he goes. Oh yes, there he goes. Out he goes. Throw him out. Throw him out. Out you go. Where you go, son? Out you go. You out. You out. Come on, quick. There you go. Out you go. Go. Grab him now. See you. See you. See you. How amazing. How amazing. It wasn't Gaza that fired him up, it was my talk about poverty. And clearly he has no idea about it. We know the cost of living was and has taken a toll over the past few years. That Labor's cost of living rises have been cemented in. They don't go away when you turn the economy around. We have to live with it. And that means we have much, much more work to do. However, this week's latest financial update means that there is now real hope on the horizon. And that said, we also know that we must progress much faster and with far greater speed. And we're going to do that with sound economic and social policies. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about workers. There are many comments from the Labor Party and their fellow travellers over the past year that the government's coalition agreements are racist, anti-Maori, anti-woke, anti-fluoro, and anti-everything under the sun. It just shows how myopic and out of touch their thinking is. But it puts in neon lights just how siloed the left is in their obsessive echo chamber. Labor. Labor, Greens and the Maori Party now rely on ideological soundbites as a basis for their policy making, which when given even a cursory glance are totally bereft of any facts. They even say to people like Shane and me, you've got the wrong blood quantum. And we say, oh, come on, have a look in the mirror, sunshine. They have become the parties of moral outrage, obsessed with accusations, gotcha politics, woke ideology, and opposing everything that happens to offend anyone that gets offended. There is nothing that the government is implementing that should come as a surprise to Hipkins. Everything we are doing was not only campaigned on, it was in our respective election manifestos and in our coalition agreements dated a year and a half ago. Perhaps it's just a surprise that a government is actually delivering on its promises. And when you're gone, go and get a haircut. Ladies and gentlemen, by the way, that's their tactic. There'll be more. They've come in here and decide. Yeah, decide. Yes, there you are. There'll be more, yes. Yeah. Yeah, I can tell. Out you go. See you. Out you go. No, away you go. Go. Go and look. Look, he's even reading from his phone. He's even reading his protest from his phone. Well, you can see what's wrong with our education system. Ladies and gentlemen, just let us remember one thing. Let us remember one thing. The spiritual home of the Labour Party is the West Coast, the site of the miners' strike in 1908, which started the Labour Party in 1916, the party that used to represent the workers of New Zealand, the coal miners, the gold miners, the labourers, the foresters, the fishermen and fisherwomen, the hard-working blue-collar battlers of our country. The cat's cry used to be a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. They represented those workers in the very industries which have now become anathema of who and what the Labour Party represents today. That's a fact. If a political party today frothed at the mouth every chance they got about the coalition government being racist, anti-Maori colonisers, white supremacists, exterminators of Maori, anti-woke, this anti-woke, that, you could place so many of the Labour, Green or Maori Party caucus at the lectern and you wouldn't know who was who or which was which. Oh, I'm so pleased you're on their side. I'm so pleased you're on their side. You can tell, who do Labour now represent? It seems like her. They don't even know themselves. Did you swear? We're going to spend more time in Christchurch and Canterbury. This is fascinating stuff. Who do they represent? They don't even know themselves. The Labour Party has decided that their entire re-election strategy will be like be patient, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, you're paying for their living. Most of them on the taxpayer, you know. And you might ask yourself, why? The Labour Party has decided the entire re-election strategy will be acting like a recently divorced partner, standing back and asking, don't you miss me yet? Like her, their lack of self-awareness is astounding. The fact is, the last 3 years of the Labour government oversaw a deteriorating economy, deteriorating education and health systems, worsening law and order on our streets, massively increased debt, record immigration, crumbling infrastructure, a cost of living crisis, and a hugely, sadly divided society. That's not opinion, it is a fact. The woke agenda of the left has crept in like a cancer that has spread so deep into their divisive thinking, it has become their sole focus. And sadly, it is a malady, a malaise that has overcome most of the mainstream media. And that's why so few trust so many of them anymore. The key aspects of Hipkins' recent speeches is what he and the Labour Party doesn't say. It's been clear for some time that the Labour Party had a forlorn choice: attempt to move to the centre, to hopelessly try to regain their votes, or push further towards the woke, cultural, globalist and Marxist left. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out which path they have sadly chosen. But that siloed left is now occupied by the Maori Party and the Greens, with the same exact messaging, the exact same ideology and the exact same rhetoric. His speeches show just how far the Labour Party has descended away from its roots and just how unambiguously they have abandoned and forgotten the very people and industries who founded their party over 100 years ago. Go down to the West Coast, they'll tell you. The Labor Party's focus is now on issues such as race, when we're all one people, as Fenner Cooper said. On DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, whatever that means. Drumming up racial rhetoric that only serves to divide our country and ignores the vast majority of New Zealanders who just want a functioning health system, a top-class education for their kids, first world wages, and an affordable home. That's what all New Zealanders want, Maori and non-Maori, Ridis and non-Ridis, inside or outside. They don't want woke. Ladies and gentlemen, delivering those four things has always been the focus of New Zealand First. In this coalition government, there's a record number of Maori in Cabinet and where Parliament has the largest representation of Maori. But in our party, we are New Zealanders first. We're not going to disown the other part of our background, whether it be Irish, English, Welsh, Croatian, or dare I say Scottish. Gives you a natural suntan and a desire to save money. To call our government anti-Maori and racist and now focus on woke globalist Marxist economic, cultural and social engineering policies as they do now shows just how shallow and impotent the once great Labour Party of Savage and Fraser and Kirk has become. We face now across the House parties that subscribe to an anthem of hate, a rissole of racism and collection of communist-type economics that even China and Russia has long ago abandoned. The Labour Party has already left Middle New Zealand a long time ago. It's evident just how hollow and impotent they have become. The few remaining more Conservative Labour MPs must wake up at night in cold sweats, thinking about how much Labour is now fighting for the space on the woke far left instead of fighting for the workers, fighting for Middle New Zealand. Their focus now is on issues such as race, culture wars, rainbow wars, and Marxist ideals that, like, none of us ever expected to hear, and ignorantly joining both the Greens and Maori Party on the race to the bottom. Ladies and gentlemen, our point to you is this. Labour no longer represents the workers. Labour, sadly, no longer represents the workers. They have totally forgotten what a worker is, or even what a worker stands for. How many Labour leaders or front bench Labour members have ever had a real job? Tell them to turn their hands down, see how many veins are on it. All right? How many Labour leaders on the front bench have ever had a real job? How many have ever run their own business? Almost none. And they want to represent you, the workers. And we're all workers in this business, all of us who are striving to help our country. How many of them are career unionists? How many of them have graduated from student unions and then started working in the Labour Party taxpayer-funded offices? Most of them. How do they know what a hard day's work means? The vast majority of left-wing shill unions these days are there to fund and prop up the left-wing policies of whoever they can fund the most. Where does Labour get most of their funding from? Hundreds of thousands of dollars for policy. Where do they get it from? Well, they're getting it from the unions. Does the mainstream media ever ask that question? No. But they'll go on for month after month after month making false allegations, get smashed in 3 court cases, and still never apologise. Positioning New Zealand in a rapidly changing world is what we've got to do. The last 2 months have seen a dramatic change in the international landscape. If many have been paying attention, then none of this would have come as a surprise. A massive change has taken place, and how New Zealand acts towards those changes right here, right now, is critical. This is not a time for New Zealand to opine on what we think of those changes, but rather to hold our counsel, allow the dust to settle, and to build on strategic partnerships, both economic and political. This is a most serious time. This is not a time to waste on what we would like to see happen, but rather urgently prepare for what is happening. In short, it's not a time for university coffee bar discussions, but reality and wise action. Huge challenges confront us, which we either ignore or seize new opportunities and take a small country to the forefront of international economic and social performance. We have done it before, and with the right policies and leadership, we can do it again. We must, above all, be guided by caution and focusing on positioning ourselves strategically for the long term, and not to react to every political concern on the barometer. We have many assets to use on the pathway forward. We are one of the world's oldest democracies. We believe in the rule of law over the idea that might is right. We must aggressively sell our country as an attractive investment destination and provide logical answers to the single most obvious question international investors will ask, which is, but why New Zealand? But why New Zealand? A question that other countries have answered. But why Singapore? They answered. But why Taiwan? They answered. But why Ireland in recent decades? And they answered. And as Croatia is doing today. And we must answer the question, but why New Zealand? And we must do so now. We have a sound resource base, and we must develop those resources to the maximum, as other successful small countries have done and are doing. We most certainly cannot pull the New Zealand rug up over ourselves in the futile belief that somehow virtue signalling will assist our economic and social recovery. Look around this theatre today. 96% of this building, will see, comes from the process of this horrible thing called extraction. Have a look around. Any building, 96% of it comes from a thing called extraction. That means using the mineral wealth we have, the natural flora we are blessed with in forestry and water, and in developing the same provide hundreds of thousands of new jobs, added value at home, and massive export growth to old and new markets, and ensure that the Team New Zealand is the first beneficiary. That is why New Zealand first started the Provincial Growth Fund, now the Regional Infrastructure Fund, to ensure that we have an environment of development and renewal and not to delay, decay and descent to the bottom. Today there are echoes of our most famous former Prime Minister, Richard Seddon. He said, New Zealand is God's own country, but the devil's mess. New Zealand is God's own country, but the devil's mess. Seddon was right all those years ago, and then he set out to do something positive about it. And we in 2025 must do the same. We must set out to repeat our country's former great successes. The world may be changing, but the principles upon which success will be based have not changed. We have always been an export-dependent country, so we must maximise our exports in every area that is possible. And to do that, as Seddon did after 1893 and Labor and National both did in the great years of 1935 to 1970, as both Labor and then National did in the great years of 1935 to 1970, we can do the same today. We have to arrest the last 4 decades of drift, where ideology overtook common sense and pragmatism. And so we'll be fast-tracking to change. And so we will be fast-tracking to change, and we haven't got a day to waste. We're here in the centre of a great province. Ladies and gentlemen, reflect on the COVID years and how important the provincial economies were in navigating our way through it. For a few years, the anti-primary production brigade went silent, and at no time, then or since, have they ever expressed a thank you to our provincial economies. Never ever said thank you. Their policies would close down large sections of our economy to satisfy their globalist view of the world. But New Zealand First is a true nationalist party, setting out to replicate the success of other small countries with fewer resources but with astonishing records of success, as we once had. And we may not always get it right, but one thing we can promise you, we're never going to stop trying. But to get to where we want to get to, we first have to deal with the plethora of malignant policies enshrouding our nation and stopping progress. We're going to declare a war on woke. And long live common sense. It's one of the most concerning and insidious cancers in our society today, the underlying creep of woke social engineering. A lot of people will tell you about it, but they've never mandated it, they've never announced it, it just is happening. This seeping of the leftist groupthink, and condoned by too many on the right, has been mostly hidden from society in the way it has implanted itself in New Zealand. Recently, New Zealand First announced a policy that apparently was absolutely, totally shocking. We announced that we wanted all public service hiring to be based on merit. To be based on skill and competence, not based on targets for diversity, equity, and inclusion ideology. And you should have seen some in the mainstream media. They were absolutely entranced with anger. Mind you, their job is to report both sides of the story. But they didn't. Think about how far our country has been taken down the left-wing rabbit hole. And a rabbit hole it is. When we have media and opposition politicians alike clutching their pearls of horror, that we want a meritocracy brought back to our public service. The reaction from some quarters was, it's a multi-vowel word. The reaction was apoplectic. Apoplectic. Unbelievable. We need common sense brought back to our country. We cannot underestimate the nature and importance of the war on woke. It is not only the DEI in our public sector, but also in our education system. New Zealand First set out in the election to get rid of the relationships and sexual education guidelines in our schools. And we have done that. We campaign on ensuring the pathway of separatism and cultural Marxism was stopped with the likes of He Puapua and co-governance, and we are doing just that. We campaign on ensuring we have fairness in women's sports. That men cannot compete against women and girls. And we have done that. But there is still much we need to do to continue the fight, including fighting against the use of puberty blockers for children. We may have won some battles, but the war is yet to be won. New Zealand First has introduced members' bills that include fighting against woke banks, fighting to ensure that men cannot walk into women's and girls' bathrooms, to get rid of DEI in our public sector, and we have many more. What's breathtaking is the anger some of these minority people have when you bring them to account. They try and explain themselves away. They try and talk innocence when blind prejudice is what they're promoting. We'll continue to be the voice of common sense and at the forefront of the war on woke on behalf of you and every other New Zealander. Our message to the bureaucracy pursuing unmandated, unelected policies is a very simple one. Do you want to be part of the solution, or do you want to remain part of the problem? If your choice is the latter, to be part of the problem, then our response is clear. Get out of the way. 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 Perfect timing. Perfect timing. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. See you, sunshine. Get out of the way and get a haircut. Get a haircut. Oh, it took a long time to find him. But the moment we said get out of the way, he reacted, didn't he? Now, about Paris 2016. In October 2016, the National Party signed up to the Paris Accord, setting targets that some of the world's largest economies have no intention of honouring. That means that no matter what we do, our sacrifice will make no difference. Worse still, in trying to honour our commitments, $22 billion plus of our hard-earned taxpayers' money will be siphoned offshore in a total self-defeating economic and climactic shambles. It's just common sense that instead of draining our money offshore into foreign economies, we invested in looking after our own environment. Ladies and gentlemen, let's look at the facts. Just under 60% of the world's CO2 emissions come from 4 countries: China, USA, Russia and India. New Zealand's emissions, by contrast, amount to only 0.17%. Why are we making a rod for our own backs? Punishing our farmers, punishing the provinces and our taxpayers and our economy, when China or the US could sneeze and produce more CO2 overnight than we do in a year. And how is that solving the global climatic problems? And when did we last see a protest against those 4 major economies from the so-called climate change activists? Were they outside protesting about that? No. That's why we were the first to call for the reevaluation of our Paris commitments months ago. We're the first to call for that because we could see the frustration that was building. We need to stop this idealistic flight of futility. Restoring democracy to local government is also on our agenda. The last Labor government took away the local voice when it came to deciding if locals wanted fluoride in their water supply. This is not about being pro or against fluoride. It's about a thing called democracy. For decades, our local ratepayers had the choice through referendum that was taken away under Labor. The Whangarei District Council is now being forced to fluoridate their local water supply at a cost of up to $5 million, which is a despotic Soviet-era disgrace. This is not a matter of being pro-fluoride or anti-fluoride. It's a matter of what New Zealanders see and value as democracy in our country. Individually democratic elected councils are now being threatened with huge fines, threatened with imprisonment, all for disagreeing with a foolish law change enforcing Wellington bureaucrats to act as a result of that change. All the council is fighting for is to have a referendum on the matter so locals can have a voice. That law had its first reading change in 2016, and New Zealand First was the only party in Parliament to vote against those changes. We said then and now that these decisions should be made by the locals through an open and transparent debate, followed by a referendum during the local government elections, so there'd be no added cost. It is chilling that we have got to a point in New Zealand where elected politicians are being threatened with imprisonment just for doing their jobs, standing up for democracy and asking for a local vote. New Zealand First backs the Whangarei Council and every other local council that wishes to fight for getting a referendum back and giving the voice back to the local people on this matter. And only fascists would think that local democracy was a rabbit hole. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, ever since the formation of New Zealand First under First Past the Post, and before the arrival of MMP, back in 1993, we have stood for the sovereignty of New Zealand citizens in our own country. We have sought to establish an economy that is designed to serve New Zealanders and not others. We have battled to build and retain wealth that is our own. We have stood uniquely in modern times for economic nationalism. We have stood to ensure that when we generate wealth and industrial incomes and improving the value of our land and the gains of our hard work, that it stays in our country and not first benefits some foreign economy. We have stood to ensure that these benefits remain in New Zealand and help the Kiwi players in the economic arena and not the spectators on the international sidelines. We didn't welcome our self-government to find so much of it captured by foreign governments and foreign money. We have always argued for offshore investment to be on our terms, just like Singapore did, Taiwan did, Ireland did, and now Croatia is. For economic offshore investment to be on our terms. This is a battle we ask you again to join and to ensure that alongside your friends, relations and neighbours, we have a real chance of winning. In the months ahead and leading into the next election, we are asking you all to take action, to stop being spectators and become real political players in the arena of future New Zealand change. As Clinton said, it's the economy, stupid. And as New Zealand First is saying, it's our country, stupid. That means we together are going to take back control, take back our country, and make New Zealand first again. And so if you are for plain speaking over vowel sandwiches, say yes. If you are for actions, not words, say yes. Yes. If you are performance over promises, say yes. Yes. If you are for common sense over blind ideology, please say yes. Yes. Now, the recent polls in New Zealand are, as usual, confusing. But even those confused pollsters can't deny, one thing they can't deny, is that New Zealand First has come back. Against all their expectations, against all their opposition, against all their deliberate ignore, we came back. And here's the real point of those polls, if they can only read them. This party is seriously on the rise. We're seriously on the rise. What's from now? Ladies and gentlemen, to quote the famous group Starship, nothing is going to stop us now. We apologise for the protesters that came here today. Fully expect to see them on 6 o'clock news tonight. You can bet your bottom dollar they won't be able, the media, to help themselves. But they're not part of the country's narrative and solution going forward. So please, when you leave this meeting, spread the word to all of you, to all of those who you meet. In all our present difficulties, there is real hope. Don't give up. Make a commitment right here, right now, that together we are going to win. Thank you. Good afternoon. Safe travels. God bless you all, and God bless New Zealand.